Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has entered legendary levels of cuckdom. Now, this is a man who went back and forth with Donald Trump in the 2015-2016 Republican primary. Donald Trump said that Ted Cruz's dad was involved in the assassination of JFK. Just an absolutely absurd claim, but he made the claim repeatedly. And I think mainstream media low-key sort of loved Trump saying this about Ted Cruz's dad just because it was really funny. And Ted Cruz, you know, he didn't know how to respond to that. He's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But then there was another fight that they had where Donald Trump retweeted something or quote tweeted something where it was a comparison of Heidi Cruz, that's Ted's wife, and Melania Trump. And it had some wording like, I wouldn't spill the beans on her. Which, you know, effectively is like, hey, your wife's ugly, bro. Melania's way hotter. And who would want to have sex with her? Know what I'm saying? So there wasn't even like hidden sexual innuendo. It was like right out there. I mean, a guy running for president who's like, I wouldn't even fuck your wife, bro. Jesus. Oh my God. Oh my God, Donald, what are you doing? So Ted Cruz, you know, I don't know if you guys remember, but he came out and gave an interview and he called, it was hilarious because he's like, Donald, you're a sniveling coward and keep Heidi out of this. Me, I'm Ted Cruz. Me. And then the interviewer asks, but will you vote for him if he's the nominee? And Cruz pauses and he's like, I'm going to beat him. I'm going to be the nominee. Well, how'd that work out, Ted? And then there was the famous instance where Ted Cruz went out at the Republican National Convention and gave a speech, and he said in so many words like, hey man, vote your conscience, which is a little bit of a wink and a nod to, look, you want to vote third party, you want to vote Gary Johnson, go ahead. You want to vote for Evan McMuffin, the weirdo from Utah, who's like a CIA agent, by all means, go ahead. It was sort of like, hey, if you want to vote for Trump, go ahead. But look, man, I got some personal beef with him. What do you want me to tell you? So I'm going to come out here and not give the most ringing endorsement of this guy who was talking about my wife's looks and says that my dad killed JFK. Well, after that, Republican donors did not like that one bit. They called Ted Cruz in and they said, hey, dog, remember who owns you. Remember who your bosses are. And then Ted Cruz bowed his head and said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. And there's that famous picture of Ted Cruz phone banking for Donald Trump. Remember? He's got that like cucked face on, like phone banking for Trump after all the stuff Trump said. Well, now, after January 6th, he was clear. He was like, look, this was terrorism. The definition of terrorism is violence for a political or religious reason. Clearly, this was political violence. This is terrorism. That's not to say that these people are exactly like Al-Qaeda or whatever, but there is a label that describes what they did. He was very clear about that. Well, Tucker was not having it. So what you're going to see here is a compilation of all the times Ted Cruz called January 6th terrorism and the people who partook in it terrorists. And then you're going to see Ted Cruz invites him on to scold him about using the word terrorist, and he backs down immediately. Watch.
Terrorists assaulting police officers, tragically murdering a police officer. Terrorists breaking onto the floor of the Senate chamber and the floor of the House. I think Speaker Pelosi can testify as to whether she made a decision based on optics, based on politics, not to have additional protection at the Capitol to prevent the terrorist attack that played out. We are approaching a solemn anniversary this week. And it is an anniversary of a violent terrorist attack on the Capitol.
You called this a terror attack.
The way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. The terrorist attack that played out.
A violent terrorist attack.
I don't buy that.
Whoa. I don't buy that.
It was a mistake to say that yesterday.
I guess I just don't believe you.
Oh. You taste that? That is cucktastic right there, isn't it? Ted, that's the saddest thing I've ever seen, bro. Clearly, he believes it's a terror attack. Clearly, he thinks that label fits. That's obvious. That's why he said it repeatedly. And then now, a little bit of pushback. He's, oh, did I say that? What I meant was, what happened was the sun was in my eyes, and me and Craig and then was down by the Safeway, and we went with Steve, and then new phone, who dis? What are you doing, bro? What was that? Look, in politics, sometimes strength and backbone is the thing that sells the most. But what Ted Cruz wants to do is be president one day. And so he doesn't want to piss off the base, and he knows that right now Donald Trump owns the base of the Republican Party. So he just backs off because he feels like this isn't a fight I could take on. This isn't a fight I could win. And look, he goes on in that interview to say, the people who are terrorists, let me be clear, not all of them are terrorists. A lot of people there are patriots and they care about the country and, you know, they were doing what they thought was the right thing, and that's categorically different. The people who I think are terrorists are the ones who attacked police officers. That's terrorism. So he goes on to say that. Now, would it have been so difficult, Ted, for you to not do the cucktastic knee bending at the beginning to say, oh, I misspoke and my words were not precise and I was stupid. But the ones who attack cops are terrorists. Because, by the way, he even goes on to say that, and Tucker pushes back on that too. Tucker's like, that's not terrorism by any definition of the word terrorism. And Ted Cruz's response is, now, so he should have just been like, yeah, it's terrorism. The definition of terrorism is violence for political or religious reasons. There's nothing in the word terrorism that necessitates somebody has to die. Now, some people did die on January 6th, but I know the point that the right-wingers are trying to make is like, well, you can't compare this to people who are, like to Al-Qaeda targeting people on purpose. The whole point is the dead bodies. The whole point in this instance, one would argue, was not the dead bodies, so how dare you equate those two things? But Ted could have just said, hey, man, I didn't misspeak. That's exactly what I meant. And I'm saying the ones who attack cops are terrorists. You're really saying they're not? So you're really saying that people who kill cops or try to kill cops are not terrorists, Tucker? You want to be on record saying that? And he could have been the I'm rightier than thou type person and said, I think blue lives matter. Apparently you don't, Tucker. That's what I think. I'm with law enforcement. You're not? Jeez, I thought you were with law enforcement, Tucker. He could have done that, but he doesn't have the alpha male streak in him. He just immediately cucks himself. But now listen, so I'm beating up on Ted Cruz, and as we should. He's the slimiest, smuggest, smarmiest weasel of a politician. All he cares about is being president. So everything he does, you have to look through that lens. He eventually wants to be president. He thinks he's like the chosen one because his daddy told him. And so everything is just like shape-shifting. How do I say the right things that'll get the right reaction? I'm Ted Cruz. Me. And that's what leads him to missteps so often because he has no core. He has no principles. But I'm not going to let Tucker off the hook here either. Because Tucker, he was very clear in that interview. Go watch the whole interview. Tucker's like, it's not terrorism. It's not terrorism by any stretch of the definition. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not terrorism at all. That's not terrorism at all. So Tucker's just playing to that Trump base. He doesn't believe in anything either. But he's just out alpha manning Ted Cruz here. So look at what Tucker said when there was a different kind of riot. So we had the riot at the Capitol, January 6th. It was right-wingers who were doing it. When there was the post-George Floyd riots, look at the language that Tucker Carlson chose to use.
What we're living through right now, despite what people have told you, is not a local problem. This is a national crisis. The riots are designed to produce a national result, the destruction of our system of government and the removal of Donald Trump. People expect a president to respond to a moment like this to fix it, and they have a right to expect that. The president runs the country. If the rioters were Saudi nationals, it would be very clear that there is nothing local about what we're watching. We would understand immediately that it's terrorism. The president would give a primetime address. Within hours, the feds would be hunting these people down and arresting them.
Terrorism. So when people protest and when people riot after the murder of an unarmed black citizen, well, that is terrorism. When people riot based on totally bogus, false, debunked information that, oh, the election was stolen. Really? 60 court cases, how'd that work out? Arizona audit, how'd that work out? Somehow that's not terrorism. Riots done by right-wingers, not terrorism. Riots done by nominal left-wingers, or Antifa or BLM, well, that's terrorism. Listen, the main point of talking about this, other than Ted Cruz being a colossal cuck, is understand that none of these people believe anything. None of them actually evaluate the world and the issues based on the information that's there. None of them are honest. None of them are principled. None of them are doing anything other than looking through rigid partisan blinders. And in the case of Ted Cruz, he just wants to be president, so he's going to say anything that he thinks gets him closer to that. And in the case of Tucker, he's playing for a team. He is a tribalist. He is a partisan hack. He's done a lot of work to try to distinguish himself to act like, who, me? No, I'm more of like a populist on the right. I'm more of like a truth teller. I'm anti-establishment and on the right. No, you're not. You're just playing to the Trump base. You know that that's where the energy is in the Republican Party, and you want to be the person who's the media figurehead of that group. And so again, any sort of principles, any sort of objective analysis is straight out the window. Left-wingers riot, it's terrorism. Right-wingers riot, how dare you call it terrorism? Don't you dare say that. These people are pathetic. Now, listen, one of the missions of this show is to deconvert people from having absurd beliefs. And I think this is just a great example of why you should never take a word these people say seriously. Now, look, don't get it twisted. A broken clock is right twice a day. So if Ted Cruz happens to have a random good take on something, fine. I'll give him credit. I think there was one time he gave AOC credit for something. I forget what it was. I don't know if it was the banks with the anti-loan sharking bill that her and Bernie did. I don't know if it was that or something else. In the case of Tucker Carlson, he gave Bernie and AOC credit with that anti-loan sharking bill. Sometimes he postures as against war. I enjoyed it when Tucker Carlson was yelling at John Bolton on air and saying the neocons are wrong. Unlike them, we are objective, and I will be fair when somebody has a good take, but understand that is not the game they're playing. They are not playing the empirical analysis game. They are not trying to be ideologically consistent in any way, shape, or form. They are total and complete partisan hacks. Ted Cruz only wants to be president. Everything that comes out of his mouth is to serve that purpose. And Tucker Carlson, his whole thing is, I'm going to be Trumpier than thou, and I'm going to appeal to the base more because he knows that's where his bread is buttered. His bread is buttered by repping a particular ideology. He's not ideologically driven. His bread is buttered by being the spokesperson for the most loud and aggressive fringe of the right-wing base. That's a better way to put it. So I just need everybody to understand that, man. I just need everybody to understand that. What you're seeing here is multiple levels of hackery on both sides. Now, in this instance, I led with the Ted Cruz part because that's funnier and because he's just a giant cuck. But Tucker is equally as bad here, just in a different way. So, pathetic. It's just absolutely, positively pathetic. And the fact of the matter is, those people on January 6th, there's a lot of stuff to blame for what happened on January 6th. A total, full analysis and breakdown of what led to January 6th is a fascinating thing. Because what you see there is probably one of the main culprits is just brainwashing. Is just, One American News Network and Newsmax and Fox News actually less so at the time because they weren't all in on this idea that the election was stolen. They called the election pretty quickly for Joe Biden. So they're actually a little bit less to blame for what happened. But, QAnon online, there was all this concerted effort to argue, no, your country is being stolen from you. This election was stolen from you. And you got to keep the good guys in power, the good guys being the Republicans. And so people genuinely believed that, and they went and stormed the Capitol, and, they thought they were patriots. They thought they were doing like a second American Revolution or some shit. From their perspective, that's what they were doing. So ideological brainwashing is maybe the biggest part of it. And then you do have another part of it. Now, a lot of the people who went to the Capitol, we saw some, breakdowns of the economics of it, and some people were actually wealthy storming the Capitol. So for those people, you can't say it was genuine material pain that led to that. For those people, it is just brainwashing. But then there was a contingent of people there who've been struggling for decades, and, they can't get a break. And the fact that their lives are in disarray and their material situation and economic situation is horrendous, and they've never gotten a break, and they're deep in debt, and they feel wrongly that this guy Trump represents the only person taking on the establishment and helping me out, so I got to go help him. So in one sense, it's also the total rot and degradation of our institutions that have left people like that behind that led to January 6th. So there's plenty of blame to go everywhere. Our entire it's an indictment on our entire political system. It's an indictment on the brainwashing that you get from the far-right outlets and QAnon and other things online. And it's a really interesting and deep conversation, but interesting and deep conversations are not being had on the Tucker Carlson show, and they're not being had by Ted Cruz. This is just empty political posturing, and it's absolutely pathetic. And I don't know who I hate more, but I am inclined in this instance to say Ted Cruz, just because that extra level of cuckdom really is the cherry on top for me. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.